Oh, there we go. Good evening and welcome to the July 26th regular meeting of the City of Arcata's Planning Commission. This is a public meeting, and if any member of the public would like to make a comment on any item, there are several ways. If you are on Zoom, you can use the raise your hand icon. When the public comment period opens, you'll be unmuted and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. If you're on your phone, you can also join the meeting and comment. Press star 9 when it's your turn to talk during public comment section, and you'll have 3 minutes. If you're in attendance, you can approach the podium and make your comments. Again, you'll have 3 minutes. So this meeting is now officially called to order. Director Loya, can we get a roll call?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Commissioner Davies? Here. Commissioner Barstow?
Here.
Commissioner White?
Here.
Commissioner Tagney?
Here.
Vice Chair Mayer?
Here.
And Chair Vasade Alcock.
Here. And at the staff's table, we have David Loya, Director of Community Development. Is there anyone else that's going to be joining us? Or
Nope, we are it, and I'll note for the record that as of yet, Commissioner Figueroa is absent.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to oral communications. This time is provided for members to address the public on or commission or submit written communications on matters not on this evening's agenda. At the conclusion of all oral and written communications, the commission may respond to statements. However, any requests that require commission actions will be set by the commission for future agenda or referred to staff. Is there any member of the public who would like to address something that's not on the agenda? Please approach the podium. Thank you.
Next item, here we go. I think there's needs for more parks in the Gateway area. I have 3 articles on Arcata1.com on the need for more parks. And there's an issue with the letters. Letters are still not making it into the packets. The letters that were supposed to be in June 14th didn't get in, then June 28th didn't get in, now July 26th, still not there. I'm up to about 9 letters from the public that have not been in the packets, and these are ones I've just run across from different people. If the June 9th letters are in the packet for August 9th, they will be there for 2 months. I bring this up because it's important that the public have access to these letters. I also regard this as a tip of the iceberg in terms of all the things that are missing, which brings me back to the first point. I think staff is overworked. There's just too much to do. Thank you.
Thank you. This is for items not on the agenda. Okay, let's forward. Okay.
Hello to staff and to commissioners. It's Jim Becker, and I wanted to speak on a subject of Elth Street on a linear park, which I believe is not something being discussed within the Gateway discussion tonight. For numerous reasons, I request consideration of the Elth Street corridor bike path to enhance and expand into a linear park greenbelt. First and foremost, the Gateway will need a park. Presently, there is no other area under consideration there in the area. The trail footprint is existing right-of-way and would not have to be made available in the form of a privately owned public lands. For this reason, the improvements could commence and would not be at the mercy of developers' choices. On the July 13th Park and Recs meeting, the chair stated that due to the scale of the infill, more than likely there would be no more room for additional parks, and suggested the park and lieu fees could be applied to projects outside the Gateway, and residents would be going elsewhere for their recreation. The corridor is presently the main artery to the Larson Park, Skate Park, Shea Park, and Stewart Park to north, and the trail network of the Arcata Marsh and Wildlife Sanctuary to south. The corridor will be Arcata's gateway to the Great Redwood Trail upon completion and connect to Annie and Mary's Trail and Blue Lake eventually. And the inside cover of the gateway draft, open spaces are addressed as connected series of green spaces, trails, and protected greenbelts and daylighted creeks to provide active and passive recreation. The city's goals for high-quality trail and open spaces is to be within 200 yards of every residential unit. The corridor would service future residents. Gateway Policy 6A calls for to establish a linear park adjacent to restored Jolly Giant Creek. GA 6D calls for the enhancement of rails to trails in relation to recreation. GA 6F is a no loss of wetlands but endorses mitigation. Restoration would enhance the greenbelt. An L Street linear park would enhance a car-free lifestyle. The L Street couplet would pave over wetlands and heavily reduce the existing footprint. Please consider a greenbelt enhancement and not a road expansion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name's Joanne McGarry. I sometimes go by McGreta because I think about the climate a lot, and Greta Thunberg inspires me. However, tonight, as I was walking over here slowly, I live in the Creamery District. I'm a tenant in a 5-unit building, and I walk over here, and today I was thinking about the future, and I was thinking about the future for the children and the young adults who are living here and will be living here in the next few years, and what the future will be for them. And it's not a pretty picture, I don't think, in many ways in terms of the climate reality, but in terms of adaptation and mitigation, I think there's a lot that we can do as a community. As I said, I walked over here today. It's getting harder and harder for me to do so, but I would really like the Planning Commission, in its planning for the future, to look beyond just roofs over heads and designs of buildings and really think about the flow, the ebb and the flow of our community. And that also includes how we get from point A to point B to point C and back again. And so when we're talking about a lot of the issues that are on the agenda or not, I would just really like us to think of the children and the future and what we want it to look like, because I really don't want it to look like it looks now or to look like it looks when I walk down 7th Street at Sorrel Place, or when, buses don't run on Sundays and so people can't go places, and there's no place safe or great to park my bike when I, go to the farmer's market. So I just really would like for us to think about what we're going to need to do to adapt and mitigate for the future in terms of how we live and thrive. So that's just what I wanted to put out there philosophically to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I wanted you to be aware of the Humboldt County Civic Grand Jury Report on the seat titled The Sea Also Rises. The Humboldt County Civic Grand Jury requests responses from the following bodies within 90 days. The Arcata City Council. The report authors claim with high confidence that without greater efforts by countries and corporations to cut greenhouse gas emissions, the planet will be on an average of 4.3 Fahrenheit to 6.3 Fahrenheit by 2100. Those temperatures are alarming. Melting glaciers in Greenland and Antarctic contribute to sea level rise. Global temperatures are now causing concerns. News media reports earlier this inform us that the Antarctic is on course to disintegrate within 10 years. This is all coming from grand jury report here in Humboldt. The National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, earlier this year claimed by 2550 flooding is expected to occur 10 times as often as it does today. Humboldt Bay sea level will rise due to the lowering of the ground level. Major problems may also occur by the land sinking due to the compaction of soil caused by the weight of buildings and other developments, as well as mineral and water extraction. Most people think of sea level rise as problems where barriers get overtopped. They often overlook inundation that occurs when water seeps through the barriers. Few realize that even with well-maintained barriers, seawater will permeate through the barriers and intrude to the groundwater onto the other side. This process is known as saltwater intrusion. 6 months ago, I submitted a question for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. It was based on the tsunami hazard mapping study, most of Arcata is in the tsunami zone, according to them. Why would the city of Arcata risk the lives of thousands of people building 3,000 units in a tsunami zone? This is a question that I presented back in February. So there's been questions that arise about where are these questions? This is a question I asked 6 months ago, and I haven't seen it. So my question is, are these going to be answered, or is there going to be data backed, actual studies being done on all these series of questions? And there's a lot of other people out there that I've noticed, professors from Cal Poly, that have asked about the wisdom of building in that particular area because of earthquake and the soil. So that's my question. What's going on with that? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Come on up.
My name is Scott McBain. I'm a business owner, property owner adjacent to the Gateway area. I'm part of the ad hoc group of Responsible Growth Arcata. And again, we support smart growth and innovative infill for Arcata. So we're pro-Gateway plan. My comments are broader than I think some of the details that you'll be talking about tonight. So hopefully I'm not breaking the law here. So first, I would like to request the Planning Commission consider supporting a recommendation that we made to Arcata City Council on June 22nd to conduct a Gateway area specific quantitative survey to better understand public opinion on specific details that will inform the objective standards land use code, and if we choose form-based code, if we go down that path. The survey would provide some quantitative objective information on specific design issues that have been divisive for the community over the last 6 months since we've had the draft plan, and hopefully it would bring clarity on what people want in a quantitative way. Despite heroic efforts by his city staff, we currently don't have this kind of quantitative information, specifically on the Gateway area, things like building heights and some of these other issues that you keep hearing about. So getting some objective quantitative information, I think, would really help us understand what the community's feeling. A similar type of survey like this was done in 2020 by the city to inform Measure A process. And a similar kind of process for the Gateway area, I think, would be very helpful, because it was very helpful for the city from what I've heard for Measure A. And I'm working on a more detailed proposal to be conducted by an independent survey expert that could do this and provide the city with better information on this. So I'm hoping that the Planning Commission can support this with City Council. Second, requesting also that the Planning Commission consider the supporting our July 20th request to you and the City Council to consider a Gateway Area Advisory Committee. This type of advisory committee is similar to task forces, is similar vernacular to what you're used to, that have been successfully conducted over the decades to help the City of Arcata move forward on these large-scale planning efforts. And the city has an illustrious history of using these task forces to bring the community together to address these divisive issues and solve some big planning and infrastructure projects, and this is needed for the Gateway area as well. I've emailed this to you guys, but just so you have a paper copy, there's a summary of the request to the City Council for Advisory Committee. It's, as you can see, it's signed by a wide variety of people in the community, including former task force members and City Council and Planning Commission. So we hope that you can support this request to City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Oops. All right, thank you. Let's see, here's, what? Oh, we have a couple people online also.
Go ahead, Sherry.
Good evening. I'm calling in really quickly. I was watching on YouTube, and most of what Fred Weiss said at the microphone was inaudible on YouTube. So just a heads up to the tech people. I hope that can be fixed for when there's an archive of this meeting placed on the YouTube channel. And I hope that any further public comment in person this evening, that won't be a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. I think we got it worked out, but I'll double check. Go ahead, Jane.
Good evening, everybody. I would ditto what Sherry said. I couldn't get on to hear audio or video until midway through Scott's comments. So sorry about that. Hope I didn't miss anything major. My congratulations to, I don't even know whether you've already done the new committee members, chair and so forth, but whoever it is, my congratulations to you, and the Planning Commission is going to be very busy in Gateway planning process, but you also have a great opportunity through your recommendations to affect the future of Arcata with respect to the proposed Gateway plan. Secondly, I want to express my support for the proposed Gateway Plan Advisory Committee that Scott just discussed, the request for which you received last week. Arcata has successfully employed task forces in the past to address major planning issues. I was the EDC member of the successful Plaza Improvement Task Force, and I hope you will support such an advisory committee now. It's not too late, given the absence of the Gateway Zoning Code standards, to obtain additional community input into the objective standards by which proposed residential developments will be judged. You're only at the policy stage at this point. I hope you will recommend to City Council the establishment of such an advisory committee to provide focused public input into the Gateway area decision-making process. Thank you very much and good luck. This is a large endeavor.
Thank you, Jane. That's all we have online. I also wanted to note for the record that Christian has joined us. Commissioner Figueroa has joined us via Zoom. And so you'll be able to see him interact on Zoom. And yeah, apologies to folks out in the YouTube world. I think we've got the technical glitch sorted out, and I think you should be able to hear now. If you have my text number, text me if you can't. I'll keep working on it.
Great, thank you. Fred, did you want to do it one more time? You want to redo? And who spoke after? Was there someone else? Yeah.
So I will put this on the arcata1.com website so people can read it. And I apologize to the Planning Commission. I hope it's not too boring to hear it again. As I've stated before, it's my belief that Arcata does not have sufficient staff in our community development department. I've looked at other communities, other cities. Our budget is about 1/3 of theirs relative to the city's total budget. It takes a large staff to make a successful plan, in my view. Solutions include budgeting more resources from the city budget, getting some grant funds perhaps, getting funds from the university, which I admit is a long shot, and relying on knowledgeable local citizens, either as an advisory group or as volunteers to do some of the work. Second, the Ben Noble presentation I regard as excellent, and anyone who's interested in the Gateway Plan should either see it or read it. Unfortunately, the audio is terrible or muffled. I took the initiative of enhancing the audio so you can hear it. On my website, arcata1.com, you can read it while either listening to it at the same time or just read it. It takes about a half an hour to read, an hour and a half to listen to it. All the diagrams, examples are there. You can see detail in the diagrams. As I mentioned earlier, the form-based code for Grass Valley requires a approved use permit for anything above 3 stories. There's also, of great consequence, Ben Noble discusses 3 options on ministerial review, including a ministerial review option that involves public input and planning commission review. I distributed some points, some issues I had with the Ben Noble presentation. That is also on the arcata1.com website. Specifically, he gives the example of Chico's Miriam Park. I think it's a terrible example. It's not walkable, for example, you know. There's 8 articles on the arcata1.com website about form-based code, some long, some short. Parks, I think that there's a need for parks in the Gateway area. There's 3 articles about parks. On the letters that were supposed to be in June 14th and then on June 28th, and now July 26th, are still not there. I have 9 letters from the public. I'm not sure of anything, but I believe there's more. But I have at least 9 in my possession that have never been in the packets. The City Council handles this well. They have amended pages on the agenda packet that are clearly marked as amended pages. I think the Planning Commission packets could be done the same way. I bring this up to get back to my first point. I think too many things are falling through the cracks. Thanks very much.
Chair, if I may, just a point of order. I think what I understand you're attempting to do is to allow people to be recorded onto the record. I believe they're in the record. It may be a little muffled, but you've taken the public comment, so certainly up to your discretion, but there's no requirement that that people are actually recorded on YouTube into the record to satisfy the public comment requirements.
What do we want to do? Do we want to have them come back up again, or
do we have any sense that anybody beyond the first speaker was inaudible? I didn't get that from public.
Yeah, it sounded like the first 3 speakers and a half, first 3.5 speakers were not well heard by people listening on YouTube, but they are recorded on our record. It's my understanding.
did you want to come back up, or are you okay with?
I did reverse what's available online, and it looks like as long as they deal with the volume on that, it's audible enough from what I read.
Okay, so we're okay. Okay.
And I can't guarantee the audibility, but what I can guarantee is that you all, the decision makers, heard it.
Okay, so let's move on then. Thank you. So we're going to move on to the consent calendar. The only thing that we have is the June 24th minutes. Do we need to pull that, or can we get a motion to approve the minutes from June 24th?
I'll move to approve those minutes.
We have a first from Davies,
Second.
a second from Barstow. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Oh,
I think I wasn't there. Was I there?
I don't know.
I think you were there.
Oh, okay, June 24th. Okay.
Okay, motion carries. All right, so this evening, we do not have any public hearing items, so we're going to move on to the business items. So it's that time of year again to elect a chair and a vice chair for fiscal year 22-23. I don't remember how we did this last year. You'll have to help me.
Yeah, absolutely. So just super high level, the chair and vice chair can be, what I would recommend, I guess, is you discuss it as a body, see if, anyone is interested in serving in either of those roles. And then depending on your deliberations, it's more than appropriate to either combine a motion, so you have chair and vice chair in a single motion, or in the past, you've also broken it into 2 separate motions. And so, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and certainly if anybody's interested in finding out what it takes to be the chair, you can express your experience with that.
Yeah, David, I just had a quick question, just because I don't know, how long have the current offices been held?
I believe the chair was appointed 2 years ago, year and a half ago, something like that.
Oh, I don't think I've been chair that long, have I?
Has it only been a year?
Yeah, a year.
Okay, it's been a year. Thank you. And it would have been on the beginning of the fiscal year anyway, so a year. And then Judith, I think you've been vice chair since 2016 or so? 2017?
1918.
I think it was when Daniel became chair, maybe?
Feels like it was before then, but I just don't know.
It's been a while.
I'm interested in putting my name in consideration for the vice chair role.
Okay.
I'd like to nominate Julie Facade-Alcock to continue as chair.
I second that, and I think it's encouraging that other people want to rotate through these roles, and I would second Mr. Davies if you are interested.
So is that a motion?
Sounds like it, yeah.
Okay, so
It's 2 seconds.
Facade-Alcock for chair, Davies for vice chair. Okay, do we have a second? Did I already get a second? He made the motion. Who made the second?
I did.
You made the
On
first, right?
No, I
And you
made,
made the second. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Just
Aye.
as,
Oh, wait.
yes, sorry. So we have actually 2 motions on the table, so unfortunately, procedurally, I have to take them up separately.
Okay. So,
first would be the one that Judith made a motion for Julie to be chair, right?
Right.
And I seconded that.
so all in favor, say aye.
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 Can you do the next one?
Yeah, and then I'll make a motion for Davies for vice chair.
Do a second.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Congratulations, and congratulations, you're off the hook. And now yeah, so. All right, that was easy. Oh, no, you guys can do that next time. It's like, yeah. All right, so we're going to move on to our second business item, which is to consider the design chapter of the Gateway Area Plan. Do we have a staff report?
Yeah, in keeping with the format here, I'll be exceedingly brief in my staff presentation. You have before you a couple of things that I do want to highlight. The table on packet page 9. This is also reflected in the resource conservation item as well. Is an updated estimate for when we will be taking up the various general plan and gateway topics. And again, these are, coming in based on our ability to, to work through the drafts and then internal review before they're ready for review. And so we were a little more ambitious than we were able to produce. And so we're here on the 7/26 meeting. We've got the gateway topic of design and the general plan topic of resource conservation for you tonight. And you can see the spread of the rest of the chapters of the gateway topic and the general plan elements. And then I also wanted to throw out there, at your last meeting, there was an idea that came up about making special meetings. And so you'll see bolded in there on 8/2 and 8/30 the potential for bringing forward special meetings, in particular because the 8/23 meeting is going to be canceled so that you can have your city council joint study session. So your regularly scheduled 8/23 meeting won't happen. So that's something that you may want to consider in here. In turning to the subject matter proper, I'll draw your attention to the Excerpted Design and Architectural Standards chapter, starting on packet page 10. And this document goes through these different sort of high-level areas of, basic principles, block length and layout in case there are subdivisions, building placement, setbacks, bulk and massing, vehicle access and parking, facade and roof design. Now, these are obviously, as policies, a lot higher level than I think people are interested in digging into detail around, what is the future of Arcata going to look like? This gives sort of a broad vision for what those design standards that would be incorporated into any form-based code would look like. And so that's the level that we can focus at this point. Do want to let the commission and the community know that we are also getting ready to roll out the second piece of the form-based code design work that we'll be doing with the community, and we've got planned in the next couple of weeks. We'll be rolling out, date to be determined yet, the second engagement piece to that, where we'll be digging into a lot of these concepts: massing, scale, setback, orientation on the parcel, all of those kinds of issues that were discussed in the first form-based code presentation that Ben Noble, our consultant, provided for us.
David, may I ask, you say roll those out. Does that mean in this setting, or is there community engagement, or both?
Yeah, thanks for that. There will be both. It'll be, again, a community engagement that's about a 2-hour-long virtual meeting. We'll have those recorded on our website, and the hope is that the Planning Commission will either, be able to attend those meetings so that they can hear, firsthand, or be able to watch those meetings afterwards and come in armed with the knowledge that comes from those meetings. And then we'll have a scaled down conversation around that in this forum. In addition, I believe that at least one of the topics for the joint study session is going to be around these design topics as well. And so you'll be getting a lot of design over the next couple of months, both in this setting and in other settings, as well as out in the public. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have about the specific policies. And then I'd suggest you open it to public comment and then come back for deliberations. Be happy to take any recommendations.
Do we have any quick questions before we open this to the public? And then we'll come back and get deep into it.
Yeah, can I ask a quick one?
Yes.
There's reference in here to the design concept as described in this chapter are implemented through the Gateway Zoning Code. Sorry, is that in process? Is that something we're going to see long before the Gateway is through, or?
Yeah, so again, the zoning code that's associated with this, for a couple of different reasons, has been broken apart from the policy work. And so there's a number of reasons that we've cited, including, potential conflicts of interest and trying to sort through those. Whereas the higher level document may be able to, resolve some of those conflicts instead of the zoning. There's the fact that, because of the public discourse around, the form-based code, the need to, ensure that we've got enough, input on that. And then also the, the work product that we were anticipating seeing earlier in this process just wasn't available and ready. And it was decided that it was much better to get it right than to get it fast. And so for all of those reasons, we'll be bringing back, based on these principles that we adopt, we'll be bringing back the zoning code, and that will have its own independent, public engagement process as well.
Do you have any time sense of that?
Yeah, my hope is that we're going to start seeing the beginnings of it. Again, this design work that we're doing with the community is the first phase of that. And then we'll see that develop over the course of the next, 6 or so months. The way that we've got it scheduled, that the EIR for this work and the general plan amendments will be adopted first. Then the policy will be adopted, and then we'll initiate formal hearings. So you'll be seeing some of the work as we're developing it over the course of the next 6 months, but you won't formally see it in public hearing until after this is all adopted.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. So you're basically saying that you're hoping that the gateway plan and presumably the general plan update would be adopted and the EIR complete before the form-based code would be before the Planning Commission or the City Council?
Before you see it as a formal approval, like public hearings on it, you're going to see bits and pieces of it coming to you along the way as they're ready, as we go through the public process. But the specific detail combined in one complete document, noticed as a public hearing for the Planning Commission to be deliberating and making recommendations to the City Council for adoption. Yeah, I don't think we'll be doing that, again, because of some of the concerns around conflicts of interest and trying to separate those in time, those decisions in time, that you won't see those until after. It'll be shortly after. We're not going to have a long period of lag between these two phases, but we want to make sure that they're clearly distinct in time.
Okay, and in effect, if there's material that appears in the gateway zoning code that would require or could require a change in the plan could at that point be amended. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess you could say yes. The simple answer is yes. I think the process answer is that we're going to base the code on consistency with this body of policy. I guess if we find something that just is not workable from the body of policy that we've just adopted, then yeah, we'll come back and recommend amendments. But theoretically, if we're on target with the conceptual level, the policy level, that we'll make sure that the implementation level document is consistent with that.
Okay.
So I'm just going to open it to the public, and then we'll come back and dive in deeper. Is there any member of the public who would like to address this? Please step forward.
Hi, Jim Becker, back up again, and I would like to address solar shadowing within the draft plan. Details are sparse. On page 97, under bulking and massing, GA 9P states transitions to lower intensity uses requires buildings to incorporate massing to minimize impacts on adjacent single-family homes. However, under building placements and setbacks, it does not address siting and setbacks in relation to existing structures. Instead, it encourages storefront siting of structures without any delineation for existing neighborhoods. Under community benefit policies on page 50, image 2, it alludes to the addition of setback standards may apply above three floors per zoning code. This message is that building setbacks for solar shading may be a community benefit. Form-based codes are supposed to be the silver bullet to address solar shading through the objective design standards. These designs are to be developed through community input and the advice of the Energy Committee. Unfortunately, on July 18th at the Energy Committee meeting, their gateway plan template included language at the bottom that the committee will not wait for solar shadowing study to make recommendations on solar shadowing. Solar shadowing studies were promised to have been done, and this has now been dismissed by staff by one of the most qualified committees to interpret them. So that leaves the community input, and I request a clear timeline for solar shadowing and 3T representations to encourage the commission to sync, and also can encourage the commission to sync a draft version of the form-based codes before making any recommendations. I also recommend that commissioners include in the discussion at their joint study session about the GPAC for as far as making future recommendations to the County Planning Commission. Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. I'm not as well prepared as I'd like to be, but I looked through just this overall, high-level stuff that you guys are looking at tonight, and kind of a couple of themes I'm seeing is there's there's a scattering of language that kind of goes on numerous points, and I'm not real clear on how the development is going to interact with the very, what do we call it, eclectic groupings of variations of structures and businesses and single-use homes and businesses and the creamery building and all of that. And I'm hoping to see more clarity with that. Some of these, I think, should be combined. And anyway, I wish I could be more specific, but I think you get a feel for that. GA9H, I made a note of that being a good idea with some kind of way of getting internal passageways that would help with parking and with maybe mini business zones or something in between blocks. And I don't know, some of the areas that have been developed, that could probably be made a great thing. And some of the areas like the L Street, that could be a long open area that could also do that same thing, as long as it doesn't become another truck route or a loud area with fast moving vehicles. Let's see, I've got on GA9P, transition to lower intensity uses, require buildings to incorporate massing strategies. I'm not entirely sure what massing strategies is, so it's hard for me to say completely, but it's saying minimize impacts on adjacent single-family homes, and that, I think, goes back to what I was talking about before, and the language on that. Require sounds good in the beginning, but then massing strategies, so require strategies isn't really that definitive as far as at the end of the line. It's helpful, but we've got GA9S, needs more detail. Car-free lifestyle, minimize vehicle parking requirements and maximize walk, bike, and transit infrastructure. And that's one of the keynotes that a lot of folks really like about this, is the idea of somehow creating less traffic, but at the same time parking and generalizing talk about parking in that manner. I think that one needs some work too. So hopefully it gets finer detailed out as we move into the policy making and the form-based codes. So, okay, thank you so much.
Good evening, I'm Fred Wise. I found a building intended for Santa Cruz that looks like a good 6-story building. I put an article about it on the Arcata1.com website. It has a lot of features that I think would be usable for Arcata. Whether or not the building itself would be good here is another discussion. But it uses a patented technique from the builder. These floors are shorter, and so the overall height of the building is smaller. It's designed so that it doesn't have a large mass from the street. It looks like a 4-story building from the street. It's actually a 6-story building. Unfortunately, the quality is such that it seems unlikely to be built here. The rents in Santa Cruz now are $2,700 a month for a 400 square foot studio. But I encourage you to look at it on the website. I put it there so we can evaluate the merits of the design, not so we could copy it necessarily. I think that you're on the beginning of a long path here. Some ideas for design elements. I think that there's going to be more districts in the Gateway area. Right now there's 4 districts. I envision 2 or 3 others, specifically the Creamery District, maybe its own district. In reading about form-based code, I realized that a lot of it has block-by-block specifics, or even half-block specifics. An example would be the AmeriGas site, which has 4 sides. Each side is different and would have different qualities that would be outlined in a form-based code. I'll also make the point that there are many examples that I've seen where the form-based code is good and the outcomes are terrible. Form-based code has to be really well designed. I'm going to read from the Planning Commission meeting May 24th, 2 months ago. Vice Chair Judith Mayer said, "Some other timing clarifications I'd really like to appreciate. There are a number of sections that we simply cannot make sense of without some discussion and proposals for the form-based code associated with them. And I think if we're going to commit to reviewing in detail the draft plan elements that are before us, To do that without proposals about the form-based code, would implement them would not mean a whole lot. And I'm wondering when the schedule indicates design for 3 sessions, if at that time the details of the form-based code would be available for us to discuss. I spend hours a day reading this stuff, and I really don't understand what you're doing. Thanks very much.
Good evening. I'm Patricia Kobianica, and I wasn't going to speak tonight, but I just want to keep it really brief and just go over a couple things. I think the community is really asking for us to stop at 3 or 4 stories. At the open house, if you looked at that last photo that gave examples of what we'd like to see, they were 3, 4-story buildings, single-story homes, were plastered with stickers. I can get you a picture of the ending photo, a photo of the end of the day from that open house, the last day, and you'll see that that was where that went. So I don't know where the information from that open house went, but there are photos out there of the ending of it. And I'd also like to really ask that we do start setbacks at 3 stories, especially in areas where there are already existing single-family homes. We in the area, in the Gateway area, that we welcome infill. It's a great area for infill. That's why I moved there, because I loved being in the area with businesses. And I always assumed there would be more houses and single-family homes. So we're very in support of that. So, if we could just tier it so there was, I don't think we'd have problems with shadowing if we did adequate setbacks away from the street line too on certain side areas. And then I'd also encourage all of you to take a little drive through Samoa and look and see how design can be, and just look at that community and see how it flows and see how you would like to live there, and if is a community feel to it, because that is one example that might be coming to Arcata. So anyhow, thank you for my time.
I would like to address the process a little bit from the standpoint, it seems a little strange if you even look up on the internet checklists for infill projects for architects and cities, it's a little odd that the number one thing that should be done is to reach out to the community as far as, is the Gateway the best place to put high density housing? It seems like that decision was made early by leaders in the city, and the question now is, what are those buildings going to look like? So I think that's the main point, that it went in the wrong direction right off the bat. That seems to be a very important one in these articles. And the second one would be, why wasn't an architect brought in right off the bat that would support this project, that would give you some rough ideas of what it might look like, not in any detail, and that didn't seem to be done. I also talked to architects in the community, and they have felt similar thoughts to me, that it was a little bit of a strange process. Moving beyond that, I would say, from the standpoint of living in an infill project in Miami from 2002 and seeing it develop, and they had similar goals to what we're doing here, is that this notion of, that cars are all going to be parked on the street is really a crazy one from the standpoint. You ask anyone that lives in any of those buildings, they would basically say they want parking below their building. They want it because some people are disabled, some people are just elderly, the weather, that's where they can store their bikes, their gear. It's going to be a disaster if you're going to tell me that all this high density that people are going to park on the streets, they're going to be unhappy. You're going to have also an entertainment district. This is similar to what Miami did. And you're going to have those folks coming in. If you're successful, which you probably want to have, you're going to have all this traffic that's going to clog the arteries of the streets. And I've seen this already happen, so it isn't like on paper, which we're looking at now. So there's evidence out there of projects that are similar to this, then you should really be looking into that so you know the results, so you're not surprised in the future with like some bad decisions. So I would go in that direction. I'd also, just from the standpoint of how this is going to affect the other areas that are in their historical areas that are in the town, these people are going to be frustrated, and so they're going to have more than one car. They're going to be parking in those areas, frustrating the homeowners in those other areas. So it's the way I look at it, if something can't be done about the traffic, they're saying that people are not going to have cars. I disagree with that. They're going to have cars. We're in an isolated area, so there's some big problems that are revolving around that really need to be explained. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone on Zoom?
Yeah, we do have a couple of Zoom call-ins. Go ahead, Jane.
Hi there. Congratulations to the new chair and vice chair. I have to admit I was rather appalled by what David just said, and I've changed my comments for tonight because I think it's totally inappropriate. I don't understand. I mean, I do understand what the conflicts of interest are. That means that two of the city council members can't vote on this project, and there only leaves three. But three is enough, and to have to withhold the zoning code until you already vote on it is a huge problem. The minute you vote on this code, on this plan, and it goes into effect, if you don't have those standards in place, then a developer can come in and you can't stop them because you don't have your objective standards in place. They certainly haven't been published, they haven't been approved. You had better not approve these proposals, these plans, particularly the gateway plan, until you have those code standards in front of you and approved. So I think you should ask David to explain exactly what the conflicts of interest are, why they're withholding the standards which were supposed to come out last December along with the plan. Now I want to go through, I took time to go back through the gateway area plan. And it says on table 2, the primary objectives of city regulatory documents applicable within the plan area. We're at the stage right now to establish specific policies for the gateway area that are more detailed than the policies presented in the general plan and housing element. The next step is to outline general strategies for implementing the future vision for the gateway area. Then, of course, we can define the specific detailed development and design standards for the gateway area. That seems to be actually where we're at. These standards are meant to enact the vision and policies of the gateway area plan. Then and only then, Arcata plans to identify permit requirements and processes for development activities and define general development standards. That's part of the zoning code, by the way. That is building height, subdivision standards, environmental requirements, administration, adjustment standards, etc. Then you identify the permit requirements and processes for development pardon me, I'm trying to talk fast to fit in, activities. And then you define the general development standards, that is building height, subdivision standards, etc. You've got to be able to understand and have clear objective standards against which to evaluate these developments. And if you pass on the zoning, if you pass on this gateway plan without having these standards in place that you've accepted.
Thank you, Jane. I'm sorry. That was 3 minutes. Thank you. Go ahead, Colin.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Can you unmute, please? There you go. There you go. Yep.
Okay, thanks. Good evening, Commissioners. Colin Fisk with CRTP, the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities. I just wanted to say that generally I think the strategies and policies that are laid out in this chapter of the Gateway Plan do a good job of establishing, the basis for a walkable, pedestrian, and bike-friendly and human-scaled development, the kind of thing that we're looking for. So I appreciate all the work that went into that, and we support them. And I think that it's rational and, in fact, fairly standard to review and approve the general plan, of which this will be a part, before reviewing and approving the zoning code which implements it. That makes sense to me, and I'm not really sure what the objection to that is. You need to sort of have your guiding principles before you have your implementing plan. The only specific comment that I would make about the guiding principles pertains to policy GA-9Q, which calls for locating parking lots behind buildings when feasible. And I would just encourage you to take out that when feasible, because street-facing parking lots, between buildings are pretty much incompatible with a pedestrian-friendly environment, and I think they can always be avoided with good design. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead, Matt.
Hi, Matt Simmons with ROCKER, or the Redwood Coalition for Climate and Environmental Responsibility. First, I want to thank staff for putting together this plan. I read through the design section again today, and I think it's going to create the kind of walkable, mixed-use living situation that so many of us feel that not only Arcata, but like a lot of our country is lacking. I echo what Colin said about keeping the parking lots invisible or non-existent whenever possible. It totally breaks up, the structure of a city as you're walking through it, and creates these areas that are unsafe as cars are pulling in and out of parking lots. I'll also say that, I've talked to some of my fellow renters about this plan, and they're excited to have more options to live, and especially options that are walkable and within, that they can walk to restaurants and shopping and sort of enjoy it. And a lot of them are getting priced out of their apartments right now, and I think they would love to see this plan come to fruition as soon as possible. So yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Matt. And we have no other attendees wishing to speak at this time.
All right, thank you. So the public comment period is now closed, and it's time for commissioner feedback. So should we go around the room? Do you have any questions or feedback?
Yeah, David, I would just like to echo some of the concerns expressed in the comments, and I'm wondering if there's a process route so that the Planning Commission and our deliberations don't end up feeling hamstrung by the conflict of interest issues with the City Council.
Yeah, I don't know why your deliberation should feel hamstrung at all. I think, at this point, you should all participate freely. The city attorney is working on a memo to all the decision makers that may be affected by conflicts of interest, with some guidance for each of you to assess your own situations. As you may recall from the land use element review just a few meetings ago, there are zoning amendments that are happening all over the city. Pretty much everywhere you look within the city, there are very few gaps where you're not at least 500 feet from one of the zoning changes. And so in order to process those zoning changes, we'll have to take them up, one at a time, to make sure that we don't have, a majority of members who are conflicted in any one grouping of zoning amendments is likely what's going to end up. Now, we're still analyzing this, but this is what we're anticipating. And then moving further, moving deeper into this discussion and looking at the gateway specifically, there are some nuances around conflicts of interest that are associated with the gateway because of the type of document that it is, being an area plan, that are more specific to that particular document. And so, without going into a lot of detail and getting way over my head in terms of the legal thresholds for different types of conflicts of interest, what I will tell you is that we've internally as a staff developed this process for bringing the documents to you that you all can participate in. There are some, like the Gateway Area Plan, where we've already identified, the mayor has a conflict of interest, for example. But the other general plan elements, in general, there's an exemption from conflict of interest for general plan adoptions. And so the entire body should be able to participate in that discussion, take action on that, and move that forward. And then we're going to have to navigate the zoning implementation, to make sure that we don't have a conflict that negates a quorum or a majority of the body from participating. So that's part of the reason why we'll have to bring them back separately.
But is it, so in that world, it's not a situation where we are not going to get all the documents we need to make a decision because there are people who are conflicted.
No,
in some fashion.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. If any member is conflicted on a particular item, they would then have to recuse themselves from that part of the discussion. But all of the documents will be seen by at least a majority of the body.
Okay. I mean, just as an observation, given the scope of this, it's hard for me to imagine anyone in Arcata that's not affected by the whole gateway plan, really. But I understand there's specifics to address.
Does Commissioner Figueroa have any questions or any feedback?
No comments or feedback at the moment. Thanks.
Commissioner Barstow?
I got a couple things. One thing that Colin Fisk brought up about is GA9Q, the pedestrian-friendly design, where it says locate parking facilities away from building frontages in the rear of the lot when feasible. And feasible is entirely too squishy a term. If we don't want parking lots in the front, which I hope we don't, then we should just say they won't be in the front, with the possibility of getting a use permit or have a discretionary review of that. So possibly instead of using the word when feasible, we could just say whenever possible, or just leave it out altogether. Another issue is in the basic principles, GA 9D and 9E. I'm not sure whether they work together or whether there's some friction between them. 9D is design diversity, allow for and encourage complementary diversity in building forms and creativity in project design, as long as projects support a pedestrian-friendly environment and other plan goals. Complementary diversity, I think, means that buildings can look different, but not be in how to explain this? Well, that they look good next to each other. So theoretically, they might not be the same at all. GA9E then says cohesive identity. Ensure new development design includes recognizable design themes and a distinctive sense of place. I'm not sure how that balances against the complementary diversity and creativity in project design. I think those could be cleaned up so you know, to eliminate the confusion that at least I have. Yeah,
I guess just for, you know, I guess if the majority of the body wants me to work on some language there, I can definitely do it. But I think the idea is that in the design diversity, you're looking across buildings, that you would have, different property owners. The form-based code will provide, a framework that ensures that compatibility across different properties. And you're not dictating a specific design, so you wind up with a cookie cutter look. Whereas cohesive identity means within a grouping of buildings that there's sort of a, something distinctive about that allows you to understand that you have, arrived at a place. And some of that would be more, applicable, for example, if, as the barrel square, as it's currently referred to in the document, the approximately plaza-sized public space that's being proposed for the Barrel District. As that gets built out, the idea being that when you get there, it has enough cohesiveness to where, it has a sense of place, even though you may have diversity across the different buildings that are in that site. I guess I would point to the plaza as a perfect example of it. The plaza has a very distinctive, cohesive feel, even though there's a variety of different building types. And what gives it that sense of cohesion, and on the plaza in particular, is largely around the lot width and the facade, for the most part being, approximately 2 stories, 1.5, 2 to 3 stories, right on the street frontage. And so it has a consistent feel all the way through the plaza. So that's how you get the mix of, cohesive place-based feel with design diversity. And so we can try and clarify that. I mean, if it's not clear to a majority of the members, I think that's an easy one to try and take on.
Yeah, well, I'm all for complementary diversity and creativity in project design.
Yeah.
And which is one of the weaknesses of the form-based code process, is that, well, in general, when you set a minimum standard for how something should be, what you typically get is the minimum standard. So project developers look at the minimum standard and say, oh, well, I have to do this. I don't have to do anything more. And then that's what you wind up with. I notice that the examples that we see of form-based codes of buildings, they're very nice, but there's a certain uniformity, not just in the given area, but there's a uniformity of the way the buildings look. And I guess that's pretty natural. I mean, if you go all over California and look at buildings, you'll notice that there's a lot of the same looks, building the same way. But this is how things have always happened historically. People design in a certain way, and just because that's what everybody else is doing, and also sometimes required by the available building technologies, the materials and techniques of building. So anyhow, when we get to the point where we actually are working on the gateway area codes to implement these policies, that's where we'll have to be really, really careful about making sure that it's what we want. My past experience on design review is that you can write, make a list of design criteria that sound very good, and the builders look at it and pare it down to the bare minimum, and you don't get what you thought you were talking about. And that's aside from not expressing it correctly in the first place. So this, what we're doing now, I think, is the easy part. And when we get down to the nitty-gritty of doing the actual form-based code codes, that's when we're really going to have to be very careful about what we specify.
Yeah, I think you've made some really important points around the difficulties of creating design guidelines. And I do think that, the form that you provide, a framework within which you're hoping that at least, many of the buildings that the architects that are working on them will have, a sense of creativity to fill in that form with a design that really reflects, their imagination, and that we'll get some really high quality designs. But to the point that was made earlier about, by one of the public members in open communications or early oral communications, you can also price your buildings by, requiring that they have, every amenity and the most, fantastic design. Unfortunately, to the people who are living in the Sorrel Place, that project has been used as a foil, by, people making different points of view. And I'm going to admit, I'm about to use it as a foil again. I personally think that the design of that building is fine. There are some elements of it that I really like, in fact. I can understand why other people don't like that design. It's kind of a no-frills building. It just is. It's plain, and I can see the critique that, hey, that building could be anywhere. It could be anywhere California. It doesn't reflect Arcata. It certainly is not a Victorian. The plain design, the simple construction method, has afforded 44 housing units in our community, 2- and 3-bedroom housing units for low-income families. Many of those families would be homeless if not for that project, because the project targets 30% area median income. And so I do think that it's going to be important for us to, as we develop this form-based code, not only think about how the buildings look and, what are aesthetics, whether they're pleased or not, but where it's important to highlight important design features that are really appealing to our aesthetics, and where it's important to emphasize the affordability of the buildings that are being built there and accept designs that are maybe less frilly, less well amenitied, and still accomplish one of our core goals, which is, housing people. So that is going to be a challenge.
Commissioner Mayer?
Okay, thank you. First, I guess some general comments and some responses also to some of the members of the public who have spoken up online and in person. I see that the policies of this section of the draft Gateway Area Plan, for the most part, actually represent best planning practices in America today. However, without the details of the form-based code that it envisions, there's no way that either the Planning Commission or the City Council can responsibly rely on ministerial approval for specific projects, especially large projects or projects of a fairly unprecedented nature in Arcata. The policy of streamlined by right approval of development projects that conform to architectural standards and meet other requirements from page 11 today implies that we know what those requirements are. And so if we do go ahead with this process, I would expect that neither the Planning Commission nor the City Council adopts any kind of streamlined or ministerial approval policy until we have specified the details of the codes that would be ministerially approved. And legally, there's, some rationale behind that too, because until the new codes are duly adopted, the existing zoning policies would apply in that area, I think. And in some cases, those zoning policies would be diametrically opposed to the policies that the Gateway Plan is expressing relative, particularly to land use density and those things. So I think that there's a danger in adopting a set of policies that relies on specific design criteria with a huge long gap between them. Nevertheless, the policies themselves, for the most part, are pretty sound. That said, I do have a few details. Go ahead. I always have a few details. Okay. First, I wanted to address not necessarily the policies and the principles, but some of the background material and the overview. And I know that oftentimes that's something that we just expect consultants and staff will just work on, and the Planning Commission will kind of ignore it. But in this case, there are a couple of features which I think really deserve to be mentioned in that background and overview section. The first has to do with the styles of construction and the building technologies that have been used in the Gateway area in the past, and issues that design would have to address in the future. The first of those has to do with the high groundwater table in the area, something that in the southernmost portion of the Gateway is not going to get better over time. It's going to get worse with sea level rise. The second is that I think there needs to be some mention of the possibility that some of these sites may actually still have some industrial contamination with them. And if the city does wish to in any way streamline approval for especially residential structures, I think there needs to be some mention of that in the background and some policy indicating that the city will do what it takes to make those sites developable in the ways that it hopes private developers will take them up on. So that's stuff from the background, but I think that it's also going to affect architecture and design in that area going forward. Let's see, you mentioned the basic principles. I feel strongly that if we're creating a plan that's going to take us through possibly 2045, when I will be a very, very old person, if I'm here at all, that we need to expect that planning standards, what we expect of a good building, a good neighborhood, a livable community, are actually going to improve in the broader scene over time. And so I would caution us against providing rewards for any developer or any property owner that designs a building or a development to standards that we really ought to expect all buildings and all developments to adopt. And so any standard with regard to bargaining for a community amenity in return for things that will profit the developer or increase density, I think has to be written in a way that can be easily upgraded as our general expectations are improved. And I think that that should actually be written into policy in this section, in our basic principles. And that should be added as a specific basic principle in the GA9 policy list. I think that all of those policies about block length, layout, setbacks are good. I think that it's really important that any issues with regard to block length and passages between, recognize that some developments may actually encompass an entire block, and that those passageways must be public, and frankly, ideally dedicated to the city rather than controlled solely by the developer. As far as the placement of buildings goes, I think that a focus on greenscaping is very much missing from this set of policies in that GA section. It's really important to ensure that the area between the street and a building is not entirely paved over, all up and down, for example, K or L Street, and to incorporate greenscaping within that streetscape, not as a community amenity for which you can bargain for something the developer wants, but as a set of basic design and landscaping standards. And that we actually do better in that area than we have in the rest of the city, rather than simply overlook that. And I don't know, maybe Dan has some more to say about that. You're the one with the street trees usually. I really appreciated the comment from the public about the bulk and massing and shading, and I would hope that whatever we do here will benefit from the recommendations of the committees that have a very close focus on solar shading, not just for photovoltaics, but also so that people can see the sky and see long vistas. Okay, many form-based codes actually specify down to the street corner level where long vistas are to be preserved and where visual continuity is to be required. And I don't think we should do any less in the form-based code, and I think that that has to be expressed as one of the GA9 policies, probably in the bulk and massing and roof lines section. Parking. I agree with everyone that parking lots on the street in this area would be a bad thing. But shoving all the parking to the middle of the block will require visual screening for residents in those buildings as well. Half of the residents in those buildings are going to be looking at that parking rather than at the other side of the street. And it seems that regardless of what income level they're expected to come from, they deserve not to have a view of cars and cars and cars. And so some standards for screening, not just from the public street, but from residents' views as well, could appear as both a policy and part of a later form-based code. And the 360-degree orientation for design is terrific. Why would we want anything less? And finally, I think cycle parking is something that the city should take care of, and should designate locations for cycle parking and preferably build it itself rather than relying only on private developers to provide it. Okay.
That was great. Thank you. Commissioner White?
So I guess for me, I'm wondering why, I feel like we need to go back or have a special session for the community benefits in Chapter 2. Because I'm feeling like kind of skipped over that. I mean, I remember we did it about a year ago, maybe it was even longer. And so I personally feel like if we could maybe circle back around and talk a little bit more about these community benefits and development standards so that we can better talk about what we're doing right now, which is the basic principles and design standards, if that makes any sense. And I'm wondering, we keep talking about the elephant in the room is still there. Nobody's put a cap on what we want to see for building heights. And I feel like that's been a point of dissension. And I feel like it's breaking my heart because I see the community being divided. And I think we all want the same thing. And I feel like until we address that, it's really difficult to have that conversation. So I don't know if that's something that is feasible. I don't know. I'm learning with you. That's it.
Commissioner Tagney?
Yeah, thank you all for such thoughtful comments. I am a little daunted by this process, I have to say, particularly this phase of this process with design. And I'm recognizing, I think we all are, that the Gateway is not going to look like Arcata. It's really going to be different. And thinking about the building, the Sorrel building or Plaza Point, and I see those types of buildings down south and in different parts of the area that as infill projects, and sometimes they look very similar. I look and think, wow, that's so much like Plaza Point or something. And I think that we are going to be slightly restricted by some realities of development standards and style and costs and all these kinds of things. I super appreciate Judith's point about setting the bar high. And I appreciate what David said about the Sorrel project housing 44 families as a low-income project. And if we over-design it, sometimes those projects won't happen. So anyway, here's the pickle that we're all in, or part of it. There's the other reality that I'm getting this evening that I didn't quite recognize is that we're really looking at just some high-level principles, you know, setbacks and things, and they're all wonderful. You know, pedestrian designed and human scaled and things, stuff that's really easy to be very supportive of. And the photos I see in the packet are places I want to walk and I want to sit and have coffee and such. How do we get from here to there? And as has been described, it's going to be when we actually start developing code, form-based code or whatever code process unfolds through this. How do we get those details into this project so that it really does look like some of these very attractive situations? And that, you know, I'm a little confused, and I see that we have design yet again on our agenda in a couple of weeks, I think, and a couple of gaps where we could do some infill meetings on design or whatever other topics. And I'm wondering if, David, it's possible that perhaps we do something with one of your planners, you know, walk us through what form-based design looks like in the city of Santa Cruz or something, if they have that kind of code, or some other, you know, so we all just go, oh, I see, and then that's the product they got, that's the building based on those standards. I think we all need to watch something together, or see something like that area could look like this if we set these standards. Because I still really don't know what it's going to look like. I know what our recent 4-story building looks like, Plaza Point. Those are really the only 2 big infill projects that we've had, aside from the old kind of 2-story apartments that are all over town. And we're sure not going that direction. So I'm thinking about those 2 buildings and then some taller versions. And I love all the pedestrian access and everything, but if we're trying to put an Arcata spin on it or trying to make it affordable, I just don't have any sense of where the boundaries lie. What the broad view of what is available to us over there. Almost everybody in town says that they are excited about infill and think the Gateway project has a lot of merit. Almost every speaker tonight has said something along those lines. But what's it going to look like? And as Kimberly said, we still haven't really addressed the height thing, and that's a huge part of design, I would think. I don't know when that discussion's going to get fleshed out. So anyway, I guess I'm starting to get repetitive, but if we could have a collective experience about what some other towns have done, or saw some visuals about maybe a walking tour on some kind of visual of what some other towns are doing. I know that a lot of places, and perhaps there's some place with a similar economy to ours, perhaps with a little bit of a similar environment. I don't know if that exists, but I think we have a long ways to go from these very broad principles to coming up with code, and we have to do that. I mean, we will be part of that, and that's what the community wants to know. What's this going to look like? How big is it going to be? How's it going to feel? Is it going to stair step back? I don't know, and I don't know how we get from here to there. I mean, we're touching on it tonight, and a lot of great stuff's been said, but we still have a long ways to go, and it's a little daunting. And I fully support having those extra meetings if they can be super targeted and take us to a next step of how we get towards this overwhelming kind of design process. I like the idea of form-based code. I don't think we all understand it very well, and I don't know how a group like a planning commission gets from point A to point B on that. How do we, I mean, staff support, we have to react to it, but what is it? What's it look like? Anyway, that's where I'm at. I'm a little daunted.
So, I really wished that we would have done this design and architectural standard chapter with the community benefits and development standard, because in the community benefit and development standards, it really talks about community benefits and what options are in each district. And I almost feel like I couldn't even really critique this design and architecture standard chapter until I did the community benefits standard. So it would be nice if we could come back and have a special meeting or a meeting and do these two together. A lot of people said what I wanted to ask. The streamlining by right approval will really only work if we have a really solid defined requirements, and I would like to see a minimum and a maximum. Right now we have it where there's no maximum, that anybody can build anything they want, as long as they have these community benefit and development standards. And I don't think that's what the community wants. I think they do want a maximum. I don't think they just want a free-for-all.
Are you referring to density?
Yes. And then I don't know who came up with these community benefits, because some of them are not benefits. I don't think they're community benefits. I don't see how the community will benefit by some of these. That's why I wish we could go over it all together. Do you want to interrupt me? No.
I want to make a suggestion for how we could do that.
Yeah.
Perhaps we can put that on the agenda for our next Planning Commission meeting, which is still on design.
Do both.
And to focus on community benefits in a fair amount of detail. There's only so much detail we can go into without the details of a draft form-based code. But perhaps we can start actually addressing what we want to see in that code in that session and dig deep into that whole concept of community benefits in trade for things like density. It's a whole set of principles which is pretty trendy, but which sits on some fairly questionable values. And I think that as a commission, we need to get into that. So doing the design, which is already on our schedule, in conjunction with talking clearly about the community benefits proposals as proposals, rather than as a draft that we say yes or no to, I think needs to happen, and ideally before the study session with City Council.
Yes, let's do that. And then also some other things that I just wrote down. I was reading this 15 times. I actually don't understand everything in here. It seems, because on one hand in this chapter it talks about design diversity and cohesive identity, and then the next page it talks basically about fast tracking and kind of a free-for-all for developers. And I don't understand how we won't end up with two developers who are building two exact same things across the street from each other, and both are going to be allowed. There just needs to be some safeguards in here. I just don't understand how in reality it will work the way we want it to. So there needs to be some safeguards. And then again, it talks about pedestrian friendly, being pedestrian friendly, and then the next page it's allowing massive buildings, built right up to the property line, and that's not pedestrian friendly. So there's some conflicts in here that I think need to be worked out. And then and I also found it sad that we're being asked to streamline, developers to come in and build these huge, massive buildings, but, the couple down the street who want to, convert their garage, they're put through the ringer, and I don't see the equity in that. I don't understand. There's too many conflicts in there.
Chair, if I might, you had referenced several policies like the section where it says something like there's a developer free-for-all. I'm not sure where these policies are located, and maybe you could help orient me to specifically what your concerns are in the policy language, because there might be some.
By right, we're talking about it's a free-for-all. You streamline by right. It's not a free-for-all. That's pushing it. But streamlining by right, approval, and that they can do. They can build right up to the property line. They can build 8 stories. They can do all these kind of things, and then.
Can I address a few of the comments?
Yeah.
Because I think there's some real misconceptions, and I apologize for those in advance, but there are several things that have, the commissioners have said tonight that sort of tie into a theme. First, I want to go back to the next design meeting that is scheduled. The idea is that design meeting will happen after, ideally after the second phase of the community design work that we're initiating. And so we would bring that back, as we mentioned at the beginning of this meeting when Dan asked, well, what's going on with the community design? What exactly is that? So you will have had the benefit of being able to watch the 2-hour or participate in the 2-hour meeting. And then we'll come together at the commission level, and if we can wrangle our consultant that's helping us with the form-based code, he'll be available to answer questions. And I think we can incorporate some of the ideas that we've talked about here tonight, looking at how form-based codes have been implemented in other jurisdictions, and tying those to the community amenities. I also want to acknowledge that there's about as many different varieties of form-based codes as there are jurisdictions. Each one adopts its own, and so you're going to find good examples and bad examples for sure. And just like with any law or regulation that we publish around design, you're going to have good representations, good reflections of that, and bad reflections of that. I have no doubt. So we'll have hits and misses. But to take the list of community amenities that is listed as categories, these are categories of community amenities in the code here on page 48, I think you're referencing table 6, and to say that none of these are amenities, I think misses the point a little bit. If you read this section, what it's saying actually is that here are some categories. These are the values that we have that we're implementing through this gateway plan, this area plan that takes advantage of the opportunities within this specific area. We have things like rapid production of new housing, high-density housing, small units, multi-bedroom units for families. Now, if you're reading this list and you're saying to yourself, that we can get that out of any project. Why are we suggesting that this is an amenity? It's because this is just the policy level. And then again, this is just a draft. And so if rapid production of new housing is not an amenity, if you don't think that a developer who says, hey, there's a crisis in Arcata with housing, and I want to come and develop
That's
it.
not what we were saying.
No, I'm trying to explain how these community amenities would work. Because I have had some people reflect on me that the list in this table, these are just normal things that come with development. So why are you giving this as an incentive? This is a list of values and ideas around which those amenities could be developed. Those amenities would be included in the form-based code, and they would be above and beyond what you get out of a normal development. There's nothing that's going to be in the building code, for example, any Title 24 target that would then qualify as amenity as well. The amenities have to actually go above and beyond. The concept here, the way that the streamlining permitting works, is that instead of having a planning commission meeting where the commission is able to give Nolan-Dolan, nexus and proportionality types of conditions of approval, which limit you to just those things that have nexus and proportionality, you would actually be able to set higher thresholds for these amenities. And the projects would, because they're being streamlined, instead of going through multiple design changes, those of you who have been on the Planning Commission long enough have seen this happen multiple times where, we request a design change, the developer comes back multiple times. They would take those funds instead. I'll wrap up, Chair.
No, I just want to ask about what you're just talking about.
Okay.
So regarding that very thing, so if you have two developers that come in and they submit something that fits in the criteria and they have by right approval, but what if they're not cohesive with each other? What if what if they don't fit any of these things? Because you have two totally different developers coming in, and what if there's no design diversity? What if there's no cohesive in anything? What if it doesn't fit into the neighborhood? How do you do, one of them is going to get rejected or do they both get approved? Was what I was trying to explain not very well earlier.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good question. I mean, basically the streamlining process, can have multiple tiers depending on, the size of the project or the importance of the location. The streamlining is we are steadily marching at the state level to more and more streamlining, more and more ministerial review. And so really what this process is acknowledging that at some point in the near future, almost all projects are going to be ministerial review. And we're taking the time as a community now to state what we want to see in terms of what those projects will look like. As one of the speakers had mentioned, the Housing Accountability Act requires that projects not be disapproved and that they have no more than 5 meetings for approval and cannot reduce the density of them if they're compatible with the code, for example. And so with our current standards, or with standards that are vague, you really do have you run the risk of having exactly what you're talking about happen, where we have just no control whatsoever in regulating design. With this process, we're going to have a process in place that, we've done our best. And I'm not going to say there aren't going to be, there's never going to be a bad-looking building that happens again. Bad-looking building is very subjective anyway, but that we'll do our best to convey to the community, to developers, to ourselves, to the staff that are operating the program, to the decision makers who are operating the program, what we mean by good design, what we mean by form. Back to the example of the plaza. The plaza is a very consistent form that has a huge diversity of individual projects, and they all are cohesive together in part because that's what we're used to. That's what we've seen. If one of those buildings were to come on the scene, as a matter of fact, the Hone Wolf, I wanted to point out to you, Commissioner Tagney, that the Hone Wolf is another 4-story building that's been built in the last, 5-10 years. Hone Wolf over on the, next to NEC property on 9th Street. And that's a very fine-looking building by a local, designed by a local architect. So we have, kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. Both those buildings, the Plaza Point and the Hone Wolf building, would likely be approvable under these design standards if they fit within the form. And so we're going to have checklists that, go through the different form requirements. And, I think at this point with the, the size of these buildings, it's completely legitimate to require that they be developed by or designed by architects. And I know we've had this discussion before. John, you made some good points when we were looking at design review and transitioning that to a tiered system, that not all architects design good buildings. We have to recognize that. But you have a lot better opportunity for having a more thoughtful design from an architect. And when you're having buildings of this stature, it's really important to ensure that those considerations are made. So when it gets down to approving these, there's going to be, still some, subjectivity that people can look at those buildings and say, I think they meet these criteria, or I think they don't meet these criteria. For the review process, ministerial doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have, public notice, maybe even the decision is made at a public hearing. It just means that you don't have discretionary authority over it. So you're not going to come in here and say, I want you to change those, windows to this shape, unless that's what's in the form. If that's what it specifies in the form-based code, then it's clear. You can say this doesn't meet the form. You have to comply with the form. So, I can't guarantee you that there won't be differences of opinions about buildings in the future, but the process is designed not just as a giveaway to developers. This isn't designed to streamline things for developers so that they get filthy rich and we get stuck with ugly buildings. The process is designed so that we know up front, through this process that we're going through now, we know up front that we're going to have decent buildings, that we're going to get good amenities, and that the projects that are coming forward are the projects that we've set as a community. We will accept these into our community to meet these objectives. When someone brings that forward, it begs the question, do we have to go through a discretionary review process? Which leads back to the difference between a form-based code and simple design guidelines. If at the end of this, the Planning Commission, the City Council says, hey, look, we can't get behind this ministerial review. For whatever period of time is left in this state that jurisdictions have the ability to conduct discretionary review over housing projects, we can say we're going to retain discretion. We're going to put all these projects through an extensive design review process. We're going to use these design guidelines that we've developed through this process to evaluate them, and then you all will get to decide, does it or does it not meet those codes? I also want to point out that the Hone Wolf building, the Plaza Point building, and the Sorrel Place building were all reviewed and approved through a design review process. All of those were reviewed and approved through a discretionary review process. And so we get different qualities of design through our decisions over time as we meet with these codes, and they're even through that discretionary review process, it's been a one-off decision over and over and over again. Do these or don't these meet our design guidelines? This is a comprehensive view. And yes, some form-based codes get down to the block level, the street level, the corner level, the individual property level. I don't think we have the resources to be able to get to that specificity, but I do think we have the resources to convey real clearly what our design requirements are for this community. So that's how these are connected. It's not just a random giveaway. The list in the table aren't just the limits, they're just categories, and then the incentives would be specific categories or specific incentives that fall under those categories.
You mentioned that you don't think we have the, capacity, the resources to do a block by block specific type of design guideline. What resources would it take to do it that way? And the reason I'm asking is because the form-based codes and development plans that you've brought forth yourself as exemplary have done it that way. And 138 acres is not an enormous area. It does seem as though in that area, in a small town like ours, that we can say explicitly what we'd like to see. Obviously, we have to base that on what someone might be willing to build and what the property owners might want to have happen. And put that out there without then having to trade off another story here for a piece of publicly accessible land there. Why can't we just say what we want, which would take a little more time, it would take more resources at the planning stage, and put it out there? And if then we're going to expect to have to stick by what we put in our thoughtful code, we'll at least know what the code is when we adopt it.
Yeah, I guess I would answer that, starting on reflecting on the land use code. Right now, we have zoning districts. Each of those zoning districts have real broad parameters for, for design, basic setbacks, building height, floor area ratio, and this sort of thing. Scaling up from that, and moving into form-based code territory, I think we're going to have a lot more definition. I don't think it's going to be parcel by parcel design standards. I think that we'll have a lot more definition. We'll have, categories, for example, treatment within the corridor, in the corridor along K Street. The intent is that that's more of a commercial corridor. And so you'll have, treatments that could happen, mid-block, and treatments that you'd want to see on corners, for example. So you can get into a level of detail that I think is going to get us far enough along to really understanding how things will develop. Will every parcel have a shading analysis based on the maximum build-out allowed on that parcel? I don't think that's reasonable to expect. But I think we can get a good sense for how, existing buildings would be impacted, and future buildings would be impacted by those design guidelines. So I think we're going to get a long way with what we've got. And I guess, this is a little esoteric of a conversation at this point, but I wouldn't let, the perfect be the enemy of the good, I guess, is my suggestion here. We do not have grant resources right now. We don't have general fund resources right now committed to that work. If we adopt this plan, it's going to be pretty darn good. It's going to be a heck of a lot better than the land use code in terms of conveying our design criteria. And if we decide we need to come back and amend it in the future to make it more refined, to give more detail to those sites that didn't have that level of detail, and we can find the resources to do that, I think that's what my suggestion would be. But certainly the, Planning Commission and the City Council can have that discussion on the 23rd.
So do we, let's see here. I'm sorry? No, yes, we did. So do we want to have, okay, so our next meeting is the 8th. And so we're going to come back and we're going to go over this some more. And can we also add the community benefits and development standards in with that, if that's okay with everybody? Or do we want to have a special meeting on the 2nd? I need some input from you guys. What do you want?
I'm open to the 2nd.
I have a conflict on the 2nd unless it's either before 6 o'clock or after 8.
I think it would be nice to be paired with the 9th with design, the community benefits, if that's possible.
On the 2nd?
Yes.
David, help.
Christian, do you have a preference for the 2nd?
The second works for me.
It would have to be earlier in the day.
Okay, so I guess my suggestion would be that I not try and figure this out on the fly, and
Okay.
that I research what other meetings are happening that day, if any, and then kind of get back, and then we can formalize. Are you suggesting that you wouldn't want to, there are a number of ideas on the table that I've heard tonight. Do you want to go through those tonight, or are you suggesting putting that entire conversation off until later?
We're going to put that conversation off until later.
Okay.
But it looks like on the 2nd, the Design and Historic, looks like they're having their meeting on the 2nd. So you're going to have to get back to us on that. But definitely on the 9th, we're going to go over this again with the community benefits and development standards too, also, Chapter 2.
The Historic Landmark Committee actually meets via Zoom. They don't use this venue.
But do you have to be there?
I do not. I have a whole staff that helps me.
Oh, you do? No, you
yeah,
don't.
with various meetings, and Dila Freitas is,
Dilo, okay.
yeah, very, very competent and able.
Why don't you get back to us on that? Maybe you can just email us and see who's available and when, and rather than wasting time. Okay, so although we're not done, we're going to come back the design chapter, we're going to come back at our next meeting and finish this. So now we're going to move on to our third business item, which is to consider the draft resource conservation element of the general plan 2045. Do we have a staff report?
Yeah, first I have to apologize for the format of the resource conservation element, and I hope it didn't strain your eyes to read it. I guess there was some conversion happened when we uploaded these documents to MinuteTrack, but we'll try and fix that in the future. And we'll upload this to the website with legible size text. So the resource conservation and management element, again, just going through the formatter, there were some updates to bring it current with the projects and philosophy that the Environmental Services Department primarily has around resource conservation. We got into a little bit more detail about some of the, wildlife habitat, energy resources, for example, and tried to provide current context for that based on some of the work we're doing, including the, the climate action plan work that we're doing right now, and tried to reference that. That's an important component to resource conservation. You'll note that many of the policies are, carried forward from the General Plan 2020. And there are a couple of notable examples where we've tried to update just, minor details, especially starting on, for example, packet page 36, when we're talking about the bay and tidelands to accommodate some of the property acquisitions that we've had over the time. We put some more detail into the forest acquisition, allocation of forest funds, rather, packet page 40. Again, just to sort of reflect current policy and practice. And then the section that was edited the most heavily comes, I think, in the energy resources section, starting on packet page 42, where we tried to adopt or indicate some of these efforts that we're working on. For example, the city's electrification ordinance. Lastly, the implementation plans. We've tried to identify new plans that will be coming up, and then we've continued the plans. Not a whole lot of deletions in this section for plans that we've completed. So, unfortunately, I don't have an environmental services representative here tonight, but I'll do my best to reflect back any discussion that may be necessary. And with that, I'd like to turn it over for any questions and public comment.
Does anyone have any questions or feedback before we open this up to public comment?
I just had a really quick question. Section 4.4, I just was wondering, being that Carlson Park was annexed, we don't ever mention Mad River access. Is that something that would be included?
I'm sorry, what section are you on?
4.4?
Very beginning.
I'm sorry, I've moved on through my pages here. Give me a minute.
17.
Thank you.
Packet page 17?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and I'm sorry, and the question was, should the Mad River be mentioned?
Yeah, just because Carlson Park was annexed in there, the river access, the Mad River, I'm just wondering if it would be.
Yeah, no, that's a good call.
Thanks.
Is there any member of the public who would like to talk about this or have any comment regarding this? Is there anyone online, David?
I just had a quick question about, just reviewing this, if there's some erroneous information in here, is there a way that we can like clean up a few little things? Just send them to you? Okay. All right. I guess one other thing I was looking for in section, I have my old man glasses. I guess this RC2H, on restoration of degraded creek resources. You know, a lot of these are aspirational, feel-good policies, but I don't see them getting implemented very often, just being a stream restoration person myself. So, you know, like trying to make these real instead of just frosting on something that isn't going to get implemented, to have a little bit more teeth on. So like, for example, on RC2H, there's no mention of like daylighting, which to me was something that we didn't even get to talk about for the Sorrel project. That could have been an opportunity, lots of constraints, but that didn't even come up. And it's like, dang, I wish that we could have had a talk about that and potentially see if there was a way to actually do some creek daylighting there and do something innovative instead of just keeping it paved over. I'm just worried that a lot of those kinds of opportunities are going to get missed without a more active effort. And I've talked with the Wetlands and Creeks Committee about doing like a Jolly Giant Creek restoration plan so that we can be more specific about what we'd like to see, and maybe that can get adopted into this to provide more specifics rather than we all want birds and bunnies. So thanks.
I would like to address whether the city's aware of a global plan and also executive order by Biden called the 30% plan, and it's also a priority in the state of California because of loss of habitat and because of the diversity of the state, that basically we have probably about over 1 million species that are extinct, and there's not enough land corridors available within the United States and the world. So the Interior Department put out information on this for our particular area, and I haven't seen anything mentioned at all about that. So it seems to be there's some pretty big reports that have been done about it. And it's a pretty top goal of the state of California, and at the federal level too, from the executive order from Biden. So I'm just wondering, does the city know anything about this?
Thank you. Do we have anyone online?
Not seeing any.
Okay. Do any of the commissioners have any additional feedback regarding the draft resource conservation element and gateway plan?
I'd like to say something. This is Christian.
Yes.
I'm really pleased to see the inclusion of policy RC7 in regards of the inclusion of the necessity for post-construction stormwater treatment with intensity and increased frequency of storm events that we're having here, not only here in California, but also worldwide. The importance of treating stormwater is even more of the utmost importance in regards to preservation of water quality and ecological environments. So I'm really glad to see that in there. And also, I just wanted to echo the previous public speaker in respects to, encouraging daylighting of stream courses and, water courses within our community, as they are the conduit of not only stormwater and waters that come, from their forests, and also in our urban areas, but also for corridors for wildlife, which is also a benefit within our community, not just, all the things that we're talking about today, for instance. So I just wanted to give a shout out in respects to that. So thank you.
Thank you. Do you have some, Judith?
Yeah, this is partly a question. In the new scheme of when we'll get to see input from committees, when would we get to see input from Wetlands and Creeks and the Forest Management Committee, I guess energy in this case, before we're expected to make recommendations or do any work on this draft in the future? Because in this case, I think having recommendations from those committees, especially with regard to their planning goals, things they hope or expect to do over the next 20 years, would be really essential, because this is basically a reworked version of a 20-year-old plan, and I know that there are exciting things that those committees are thinking and talking about that aren't in here yet.
Yeah, again, just that's a really good question. I don't have a very direct answer for it, so I'll tell you the process generally. But it's, we aren't compelling the committees to review or make recommendations. It's really up to their, those chairs to take it on. We're not compelling them to make decisions by any firm fixed deadline. So it's kind of, up to those bodies. Some of them have decided to, take special meetings. None of them yet have established, subcommittees to review these. But these documents are coming out basically as soon as they're released. So that the idea is that we're getting these out to the commission as soon as we possibly can, so that you have them in draft format. The committees are then reviewing them at their earliest convenience. They've been, invited to hold special meetings. So I can't really speak to exactly when or whether, their recommendations will come forward. Before, you decide that you want to take action on them. I suppose you could at some point say, look, we're just not taking action until we get those recommendations. But again, I think the timing on this whole process is another, issue that we've discussed before. And I think it's a good, point of discussion for, for your meeting with the City Council on the 23rd. I guess as long as I'm on this tangent, I'll update the the commission on some progress that we've been making with some of the deadlines that were, discussed previously that were kind of driving some of the timelines. Some of them are more fixed in stone than others, and we're, still pending some of those, but we're continuing to, reach out to, our grant funders, HCD with the mandatory rezones established in law and related to our housing element, and have made some pretty good progress. One of our lenders, one of our granting agencies has sort of agreed in concept to extending, and this is the SALC funds that were supposed to end December of this year. We've been working with them for the past couple of months, and they've agreed in concept to extending the deadlines through to basically summer of next year for completion of this process. And then the HCD is under review for our housing element compliance, and we're in dialogue back and forth on that. That'll ultimately require council action if we're able to do that. So I guess I'm just telling you this so that you are aware that we're continuing to try and make efforts to extend out the timelines that we're sort of pressurizing the progress before. We're still on about the same timelines, I think, in terms of, sometime early next year, trying to have made good progress on these. If the housing element, for example, requirements are extended, those will be extended for a year, and so we'll have until August of next year to complete the work. So, long rambling answer to I don't know, and I can't really tell you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's definitely something we can talk with the City Council about, because they may be able to formally request that the committees provide good input for the plan update process, and they can probably make that happen better than either you or we can do. So that would help a lot.
Yeah, and I am encouraged by the work they did, all of the committees did over the last 2 weeks. In the last 2 weeks, we went to almost every standing committee that the city has, with the exception of Forest Management and the UUT. And I don't think the UUT committee, the tax committee, is going to be interested in weighing in on the Gateway Plan, but they all took it up, and they've all either committed to, they've made a recommendation, or they've continued the item to special meeting to make a recommendation, or they're in process. So I feel like they're making good progress bringing that forward.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I think we're ready to move on to correspondence. And
I said I had some comments too.
Oh, go ahead. Why'd you stop?
I was hoping that that was a question that I had.
Oh,
then
okay. I thought you meant
I thought I would
later.
give other people a chance to make their comments. No comments?
No, just you.
Okay. That's what we're here for, is to provide feedback. So here's some feedback. I think the fact that staff has provided us with a draft, which is basically a lightly updated version of what we had in our 2020 general plan, speaks to the robust nature of that 2020 plan, which was developed with a humongous amount of public input, including on these topics. And so I think that the overview here provides very much the kind of language that we would have expected in 2020, and that it could use a bit more attention to issues like sea level rise and the threats linked to climate change for our forests and creeks and wetlands and watersheds, things that Arcata has invested in so heavily. I also think that there are a couple of places where it would make sense to link the resource conservation policies explicitly to policies in other parts of the general plan, including things that will appear in the open space element in the local coastal program, which really aren't mentioned in this draft at all. And so establishing some of those linkages to other parts of the plans and making explicit reference to them would really help the public figure out where all this kind of fits together. There are a number of places where I think those other committees have works in progress with implementation measures that can actually appear even now in the general plan element. Even if the implementation measures aren't fleshed out, the policies can certainly be updated. And So I would just love to see some of those come back to us so that we can help do that work of integrating it and with other parts of the plan. I think it's really important that we have those maps of sensitive habitat and other areas where land use restrictions might apply, and that there be some way that the plan can designate where members of the public, developers, conservationists can find updated versions of that material. And I think it's important that it be done in enormous detail, especially in the Gateway area, if we're trying to ease the way for developers not to have to do all of those things themselves, such as wetland designations or wetland delineations. I think the city should actually attempt to do that for any place where they hope to see any kind of streamlined development approval. And that's something we can debate, but I think it's a policy that would be consistent with those that staff has already proposed. And yeah, it takes money.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Yeah.
So you'd mentioned work that other committees are doing, plans that they're working on, and you don't necessarily have to do this now, but if you can give me some hints. The Environmental Services Department did review this, and they're the liaisons for those committees. So, I assume that they'd done diligence there, but if you have suggestions, that'd be great. The climate change policies may be something that we link as well. There is going to be an updated, probably in the safety element, we'll bring in a lot of our climate policies. Haven't really decided yet whether it's best to keep them in the safety element, as some jurisdictions have done, or put it in a separate element. Some of them will be scattered, as you'd mentioned, in the local coastal program. So that might be another policy nexus instead of putting them into this chapter.
Probably.
Does that make sense?
Well, I think they need to be in both places. And certainly, the Wetlands and Creeks Committees and Forest Management Committee, local coastal program, they're all going to have policies related to climate change. And so making that an integral part of this element and doing it up front, including in the overview, is a really, really important thing if we want this thing to last and provide us with good advice through 2045.
Yeah, I think with that recommendation, I definitely want to get direction, broad direction on that. We have, the general plan as it's currently drafted, and sort of the approach that we've taken is to try and be as efficient as possible, so we don't have a whole lot of overlapping policies between the various areas, which also helps to ensure that you don't have it reduces the potential for conflict or differences of interpretation. So that's something that would be the good discussion for the
okay. Well, I'm really glad. I'm really glad to hear that you're thinking about where climate change and its impacts and possible adaptation and mitigation measures would appear in this section, because without it, we don't have a 2045 document. And so, obviously it's a work in progress, and that's some of the progress.
Okay.
So, let's see. One of the specific policies related to access to Arcata Bay, and it said, I think, either improve the dock down at the marsh, I think it was South I Street, or move it. And this came up before in the capital improvement program documents over several years, and I would really like the city to consider a policy of providing boat facilities on Arcata Bay for non-motorized vessels and emergency response vessels, but not for motorized recreational vessels. I think that given the tidal characteristics of the area around the marsh, not only would that not be consistent with the wildlife conservation goals of that part of Arcata's terrestrial and aquatic environment, but it would actually pose a safety risk with people bringing in their speedy boats and then getting stuck in the mud because, oops, they were not realizing that the tide was going to come in and they wouldn't have enough water to get back to the dock. So I think that's a policy that we should consider and recommend as part of this plan. And I know that we've got $500,000 that keeps popping up in the capital improvement program to address the dock issues, but I think that, motorized recreational vessels coming into our marsh dock would be a disaster. Be great to find an alternative to the term passive recreation. And I know that there are a couple of other sections of the plan that have successfully done that. Low impact, minimal facility recreation, the idea that people who are walking, watching, breathing, and not playing games or, necessarily standing there with binoculars are passive is kind of, I know it's part of the recreational planning jargon, but it's really offensive. Let's see. And finally, in the agriculture section, another issue that's come up repeatedly, our current policies with regard to agricultural exclusive land use would allow for large-scale industrial factory facilities, especially for agricultural processing. And we had a kind of a debacle with the Cypress Grove Chevra factory, which is allowed in an agriculture exclusive zone, despite the fact that there's no crop production going on there and there's no livestock present. And so I would strongly recommend a policy that would limit the development of essentially industrial facilities on our agriculture exclusively zoned areas. And that's something that we can also recommend to the county as well, which has zoning authority on our borders. It came up in the context of, the large-scale cannabis grows that would be in part indoors and very, very visible from within Arcata city limits. So finally, I feel like most of the energy material in here refers to policies that are basically RCEAs. It would be great to have input from Arcata's committees so that we can more specifically reference Arcata-specific policies there. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else before we move on? Okay, we're moving on to correspondence and communications. Any correspondence or communications?
I have a question for Mr. Loya. Are there any tutorials or anything you recommend on form-based code for us? I'm thinking homework-wise, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll forward an email that has a list of resources to the Planning Commission. Then we also have several resources on our SERP page, the Strategic Infill Redevelopment page. If you Google SERP and Arcata, it's the first hit. And so there are some links there for a couple of resources. And I'll try and reference, we brought forward to the Planning Commission several months back now some sort of primer materials. The video we were going to watch didn't work, and I encourage you to go and watch it individually because it was a very good video. So I'll make sure that is front and center on our webpage too, so that you can use that as a resource.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we can put this on a future agenda, but I would like to make a proposal that we entertain a recommendation of the special task force or committee, and also to have a discussion about the survey that would include some quantitative data. And also, whatever happened with the 3D modeling? When was that going to happen? Oh, and one more. Sorry. Home key. Looking for an update. I was listening to, maybe it was the one before, City Council said something to the effect that the Days Inn was getting ready to roll and that they were possibly going to begin renting in a couple weeks. But the residents in the community have not received any updates, as far as I know, since January at the application process.
It's getting late, so you may have to help me with the three items. Working backwards, the home key, I don't have any updates on when people are moving in. That deal isn't even closing until 7-8 months from now for the Days Inn project. So I don't think that people are going to be moving in. There's a construction project that's going to happen between now and then. So I don't have direct information for that, but that doesn't sound like it would be consistent with where they're at in the project. The other home key project is, has submitted building permits and is moving forward with their project, and hoping to close the deal very soon. The second issue was, you'll have to remind me.
If we're working backwards, 3D modeling?
Excuse me?
3D modeling?
3D model. Some of the 3D modeling will be available in the phase 2 design process that we've been talking about.
So August 8th?
Excuse me?
Was that August 9th?
I don't have a specific date for it, a date to be determined in August. And the idea is that we'll have that engagement before the 23rd, the meeting on the 23rd with the city council, so everyone will have the benefit of that. I don't have a specific date yet for when all of the 3D modeling will be released, but we are working diligently on it. The GHD's architect is, doing some models, more detailed models for a couple of the opportunity sites that are identified in the plan, and so we're looking forward to having some more detail on that soon. And then, I'm sorry, remind me of the first item.
So looking for a survey questionnaire conversation?
Oh, the questionnaire and if the chair wants to put that on the agenda, obviously, or if the majority of you want to have a discussion about it. Certainly the decision to do that is obviously a council decision, and we can, definitely have discussion about it. Not at this time.
What is this, a survey for what?
We were looking for a survey questionnaire to just survey the community more than just what we've had in January, since that report hasn't necessarily been forthcoming, just to get some insight about what people really want.
In the Gateway project.
Yes, correct, sorry. Yes, in the Gateway project. And then the last question, or the first, which was, would we be entertaining the recommendation of a special task force or committee for the Gateway project?
Yeah, again, that's the same process for setting agenda items. Certainly can discuss it, and staff will provide some input on that, and ultimately it's a council decision.
So maybe that would be something we can put on the agenda for our study session, talk to the council about maybe delegating some tasks regarding the Gateway to community members, and then we can also talk about the surveys, since they have the final. We can't do anything without their permission. Maybe that'd be something we could talk about at our joint study session.
Certainly, so there may be an avenue for bringing that up, I guess, is what I'll say. The agenda is being worked on. The mayor's setting the agenda for that. And so I'm sure that there's an avenue for discussion around that at that time, if that's what the Planning Commission wants to do.
I think we could at least discuss it with them and just throw it out there and see what they have to say. Might help.
What do you think about us discussing it here first?
That's what I was hoping. the study session isn't until the 23rd, but we do have a possibility of a couple special meetings, well, at least one before. And it could be just an agenda item, doesn't have to take up an entire meeting.
I think just as a matter of order, we're getting a little long in the discussion here, and the communications are intended to be brief. So I think the chair's got a sense for it, and we will meet and discuss the upcoming agendas.
David and I will discuss it, so. All right, anything else?
I just have a couple of quick comments. Number one, Planning Commission, City Council are having a joint study session on the 23rd of August. Very excited about this. We've been trying to schedule that for some time, so that'll be good. It's open to the public, so please come. The other thing that I wanted to address, and we had a public member who brought this up early in oral communications, that the grand jury report on sea level rise was released, and the City Council will be reviewing its response to that on August 3rd. So if you're interested in that discussion, tune in. August 3rd, regular City Council meeting. I think that's all I have right now.
All right, if there's nothing else, this meeting is adjourned.